Rogelio, and Raphael. Maybe they go through time as cops. Maybe it's like Van Damme's Time Cop. But it's...
The situation quickly spiraled into something far more complex than a private disagreement, evolving into a highly publicized controversy fueled by claims, alleged evidence, and legal maneuvering. Reports suggested that a large volume of documents, communications, and supporting material were either shared or intended to be shared publicly, allowing anyone to review the information and form their own conclusions. The underlying goal appeared to be transparency, putting everything on display, so observers could judge whether there had truly been harassment, retaliation, or even a coordinated smear campaign. What made the situation even more serious was the breadth of the allegations, which extended beyond a single workplace conflict and touched on areas such as employment practices, housing concerns, business relationships, and even involvement with state-funded programs. This wide scope hinted that the dispute was not just personal, but potentially systemic in nature. According to various accounts and alleged evidence circulating online, the premiere night of It Ends With Us became a turning point that dramatically intensified the narrative. What should have been a celebratory and career-defining moment reportedly turned into a deeply uncomfortable experience for Justin Baldoni. Claims emerged that he, along with friends and family members who had come to support him, was confined to a basement area for over an hour during the event. The alleged reasoning behind this situation quickly drew attention. Reports claimed that his co-star, Blake Lively, did not want him to be visible at the premiere. If true, this would suggest something far more intentional than a simple scheduling conflict or misunderstanding. What might have initially been dismissed as an awkward or minor incident began to take on a much more serious tone, interpreted by many as a deliberate act of exclusion that pointed to deeper tensions behind the scenes. As these claims gained traction, fans and observers began to revisit earlier moments with a more critical eye. Subtle signs that once seemed insignificant started to feel meaningful, interactions that appeared strained, noticeable distance between cast members, and even social media behaviors such as unfollows or lack of engagement. Public appearances further fueled speculation, with Baldoni often appearing to handle press responsibilities alone, while others seemed aligned in a more coordinated way. The overall atmosphere surrounding the project began to feel uneasy, as if something unresolved was lingering beneath the surface. The alleged basement incident, in particular, became symbolic of the growing divide, transforming into a key talking point that amplified curiosity and concern. What started as quiet speculation soon exploded into a full-scale media storm, capturing widespread attention across entertainment, news, and social platforms. The narrative shifted rapidly from behind-the-scenes tension to an unfolding Hollywood drama. With each new detail adding another layer of intrigue, it became increasingly clear that this was not an isolated disagreement or a one-off incident, but rather the beginning of a much larger and more complicated conflict. The situation hinted at a deeper, more intricate story, one involving conflicting perspectives, strategic decisions, and a battle not just over events, but over how those events would ultimately be perceived by the public. In many ways, this moment marked the opening chapter of an ongoing war of narratives, where both sides appeared determined to shape the story in their favor, setting the stage for further revelations and escalating tension in the days to come. By choosing to file a complaint with the California Civil Rights Department rather than immediately pursuing a full lawsuit, Blake Lively positioned herself in a way that allowed maximum control over the narrative from the very beginning. This approach created an opportunity to present her claims publicly, frame herself as a victim, and generate widespread media attention without stepping into the more demanding environment of a courtroom. The strategy carried clear advantages. By stopping short of full litigation, she could avoid the discovery process, where internal communications, documents, and testimony under oath might have been scrutinized in detail. Instead of focusing on securing financial damages through a traditional legal route, the move appeared centered on shaping perception, influencing headlines, and maintaining control over how the story was told. It reflected a calculated blend of legal positioning and public relations strategy, where the goal was not just to win a case, but to win public opinion. In this larger battle, the courtroom became only one part of the equation, while media coverage and audience sentiment played an equally powerful role. However, Justin Baldoni's camp wasted no time in pushing back against what they described as a carefully curated and selective narrative. His team alleged that key pieces of evidence, particularly text messages, had been presented in a way that supported only one side of the story. According to their claims, the full, unedited conversations between Baldoni and Lively painted a very different picture than the one being publicly circulated. These complete exchanges, they argued, significantly contradicted the allegations, suggesting that certain interactions had been taken out of context to portray Baldoni as the aggressor while justifying Lively's position. As these claims surfaced, pressure began to build, both legally and publicly, forcing Lively to defend her version of events against a broader and more detailed body of evidence. What followed was a dramatic shift in momentum. turning the dispute into a high-profile battle over credibility, where each side attempted to establish its version of truth in the court of public opinion. As tensions escalated, another unexpected layer was added to the controversy with the reported involvement of Ryan Reynolds. As Lively's husband, his presence in the situation quickly drew attention, especially amid claims that he and his public relations team had stepped in to help manage the fallout. While the intention may have been to contain the damage, critics argued that his involvement only complicated matters further. Online reactions were swift, with many questioning why he appeared to be so deeply entangled in a professional dispute that did not directly involve him. Past anecdotes resurfaced, including claims that he had previously influenced creative decisions without the knowledge of key collaborators, adding fuel to speculation about behind-the-scenes dynamics. What might have been seen as personal support began to blur into perceived professional interference, intensifying scrutiny around both his role and the broader power dynamic between him and Lively. Rather than calming the situation, his involvement seemed to amplify it, drawing even more attention to the unfolding drama. Meanwhile, the New York Times found itself pulled into the center of the controversy, facing serious allegations regarding its reporting. Baldoni's legal team accused the publication of failing to properly verify the claims presented in Lively's complaint before publishing its coverage. According to these allegations, the article was released ahead of an expected deadline and contained inaccuracies, omissions, and misinterpretations that leaned heavily in favor of one side. This, they argued, pointed to a breakdown in journalistic standards and due diligence. The resulting lawsuit against the publication elevated the situation beyond a celebrity dispute, turning it into a broader conversation about media responsibility and bias. Questions began to emerge about how narratives are shaped, amplified, and sometimes accepted without sufficient scrutiny, especially when high-profile figures are involved. One of the most contested pieces of evidence in the entire situation was a text exchange dated August 16th, which Lively's side used to support claims of a coordinated smear campaign. In the messages, a media article questioning her public image was allegedly shared, followed by comments that were interpreted as acknowledgement of a deliberate effort to influence public perception. However, Baldoni's team strongly rejected this interpretation, arguing that the conversation had been taken out of context and misrepresented. They claimed that, when viewed in full, the exchange did not support the narrative being presented, and that its use in the complaint was both misleading and factually unsupported. This dispute over a single piece of evidence became a pivotal moment, raising larger questions about selective presentation and the reliability of the claims being made. The conflict reached another turning point when Baldoni's attorney, Brian Friedman, stepped into the spotlight during a high-profile media appearance. In an interview with Megyn Kelly, he presented what he described as substantial evidence, including audio messages attributed directly to Baldoni. These recordings, along with other materials, were introduced as part of a broader effort to challenge Lively's claims and provide an alternative narrative grounded in documented communication. The interview quickly gained attention, as it offered the public a more detailed look into the dispute and the competing accounts surrounding it. By presenting tangible evidence rather than relying solely on statements, Baldoni's team aimed to shift the conversation and reinforce their position. As all of this unfolded, the situation evolved into more than just a legal disagreement. It became a layered and highly strategic conflict involving law, media, and public perception. Each new development added complexity, making it increasingly difficult to separate fact from interpretation. This highly publicized moment proved to be a significant setback for Blake Lively's narrative, introducing an element of contradiction that was difficult to ignore, especially as momentum began to shift following the countersuit from Justin Baldoni. What made the situation particularly impactful was not just the existence of conflicting claims, but the visual nature of the moment itself. The clip in question created an awkward and revealing contrast between Lively's public statements and the behavior being discussed, leading many observers to question the consistency of her position. For audiences already following the story closely, this became more than just another development. It felt like a visible crack in what had previously appeared to be a carefully managed narrative. As a result, doubts about credibility, intent, and underlying motivations began to grow, adding further complexity to an already layered dispute. At the same time, the controversy became increasingly entangled with speculation that extended beyond professional disagreements. Rumors began circulating about a possible personal dimension to the conflict, including unverified claims regarding Lively's alleged feelings toward Baldoni and whether those emotions may have influenced events. While there is no confirmed evidence supporting such assertions, their persistence added a new and emotionally charged angle to the discussion. In the world of celebrity culture, where perception often carries as much weight as fact, these kinds of rumors can significantly shape public opinion. The blending of alleged workplace conflict with speculative personal dynamics created a more sensational narrative, one that blurred the line between documented events and conjecture. Even without verification, these ideas contributed to heightened scrutiny, prompting audiences to re-examine the motivations behind the legal actions and public statements. The situation also expanded beyond the two central figures. drawing in Ryan Reynolds in a way that further intensified public interest. Initially perceived as a supportive partner on the sidelines, Reynolds increasingly became part of the conversation as reports and opinions about his involvement surfaced. Critics argued that his actions, whether related to creative input, public messaging, or promotional decisions, crossed into territory that complicated rather than clarified the situation. In particular, backlash grew around the tone of certain promotional efforts connected to It Ends With Us, with some viewers feeling that the seriousness of the story's themes was not being appropriately reflected. This criticism fueled broader conversations about tone, responsibility, and the challenges of balancing commercial appeal with sensitive subject matter. Rather than easing tensions, Reynolds' perceived involvement appeared to amplify them, adding yet another dimension to an already complex narrative. Meanwhile, both sides continued to reinforce their positions. Supporters of Lively pointed to alleged leaks and communications they believed supported her claims, while she herself maintained that she was simply speaking her truth. On the other hand, Baldoni remained firm in his stance, continuing to challenge the allegations while emphasizing his commitment to storytelling and creative integrity. Reports that he had been sidelined in aspects of the very project he helped lead only added to the perception of a deeper conflict over both control and recognition. This contrast in messaging, one side focused on personal grievance and accountability, the other on artistic purpose and resilience, further solidified the divide in public opinion, with audiences increasingly aligning themselves with one